Dear friends, this is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our discussions of the feature-length works from that great, brilliant filmmaker and artist, that is Brian De Palma. And today I'd like to talk about a film that is described as being from the year 1970, released in 1970, and it is called DIONYSUS in '69. It is a very curious and interesting work in the canon of Brian De Palma's filmography body of work. So let me talk about that with a little bit more detail in the latter half of this video. But for those who haven't seen it yet, let me say that I think it is, relatively speaking, somewhat of a difficult film to access and to find. I think for me, I can say that the only way I was able to watch it was through a French DVD set that I was able to order online. And it's right here, in fact. It has 2 discs, and it's right here. This is the DVD set, which has a number of the early works, feature films and short films of Brian De Palma, on 2 DVDs. Again, this is the French DVD release. And we have, among those films included here is DIONYSUS in '69. So it was this was the only way for me to be able to watch this. If there are other ways and other means for you to access and watch DIONYSUS in '69, of course, I hope that you find the appropriate method for watching the film. It is a very interesting work. It is also a very curious one. And so from this point on, let me now talk about the film with a little bit more detail. If you haven't seen the film and you don't want to be spoiled, then perhaps I suggest that you can turn off this video now and then try to find and watch DIONYSUS in '69, and then come back at any time to watch this video, because from here on, we'll be talking with a little bit more detail about the film itself. So if you don't want to be spoiled, then I suggest you turn off this video now, and you can come back anytime you want, my dear friends, because the video will still be up. Or if you're okay with a little bit more of a detailed discussion, from here on out, let's now talk with more detail about the work DIONYSUS in '69. So I should point out that it is credited to Brian De Palma, Robert Fiore, and Bruce Rubin. And of course, this is a reference to the stage play, or the stage work performance by the Performance Group. And this is Richard Schechner. And specifically, this is a work that is described as cataloging or documenting or showing or capturing on film the performances of DIONYSUS in '69, the theater performances in this interactive stage space during the summer of 1969. So that's my understanding. So that is where we have this sort of work coming into being. And I think we can also describe it too as, DIONYSUS in '69 is a type of maybe experimental play or interactive theater experience, which is based upon the underlying work, the Bacchae, the work by Euripides. And so we have the central focus, or one of the central foci of the play itself, is the tension or debate or discussion between Pentheus and Dionysus. And so the idea of who is a god and who is human, and who has authority and who has no authority. And so this debate going back and forth between and among essentially these 2 poles, while we also have engaged within the work itself a number of elements that I think make for very compelling and quite a unique stage adaptation and theater experience, which is again captured in terms of this film. We should also be clear that the film itself is not an adaptation of the play per se, but it could be said to be a film that is, in a sense, like documenting or capturing the performances as they are occurring within the space of the theater itself. So we have the audience members, and we have the actors, the performers within the space, and the audience members are sitting in this sort of experimental theater space. So it's not the sort of traditional stage and separation between stage and the audience seats, but rather it has a more enclosed, interactive feel. And the sets have also an experimental look to them in terms of a modern stage design. And we also have the element, too, of the interaction between the actors' space and the audience space. So oftentimes we see actors entering the audience space, or the audience members sitting in areas where the acting is taking place. And so there is that blending of the line, or blurring of the line, between the spectators and the actors. And of course, we've seen the blurring of the lines in this way in terms of art and spectacle, or art and the spectatorship, in films like, say, Hi Mom, or we will see that in films like, say, Hi Mom, and others. And indeed, taking a broader step back, the idea of watching something, art within art, or films within films, or productions within productions. We will see that in many Brian De Palma work. For example, Sisters, the TV within the TV. It's also true for for Greetings, TV within for Sisters, I'm sorry, it's not TV within TV, but TV within the film. And the same for Greetings, TV within the film, the shot of Lyndon Johnson at the start of that film, Greetings. So the idea of a sort of art space within the frame of the film itself, and that being Dionysus in '69. Speaking of the frame itself, I think another aspect that's very standout, very key, is the application of split screen. So this film is using the visual conceit of the split screen. Thus, we have different sets of action that are occurring simultaneously throughout the course of this work, which is about 90 minutes or so. And so sometimes we'll have different perspectives on the same set of actions that are taking place, either quote unquote backstage, or as the play is being performed. And included, I should say, in the performers, the cast is William Finley, who portrays, a member of the group, as well as himself, in terms of references to their names, their actual names, William Finley, etc. And then portraying, in the context of Dionysus in '69, Dionysus. So a very fascinating position for William Finley. Again, it's another collaboration between De Palma and William Finley. It's one of the great director-actor collaborations, I would suggest. And so this is another example of it. And indeed, we will see more of that great director-actor collaboration moving forward within Brian De Palma's filmography. But here we have it. And it's quite a performance, too, in terms of the way that he gives these soliloquy-like speeches that often have a high degree of intensity, while also portraying a real physicality to the role. There is a lot of physical motion. There's a lot of motion that can be said to be akin to dance. There's a lot of disrobing and nudity to portray or suggest some orgiastic situations, or perhaps the ebb and flow of human biology, birthing, and also a type of interaction between and among human beings. So there's a sense of the corporeal, as well as a sense of the heightened ethereal in terms of the speeches and the debates and discussions. Again, the idea of the earthly and the heavenly, and the idea of what is human and what is godly. And so I think that is, again, akin to the essential debate between the characters, Pentheus and Dionysus, underlying the Bacchae, the work itself, the underlying work, as well as Dionysus in '69. And so we have that a very fascinating dynamic. So going back to the split screen, so sometimes we'll have split screen that is different perspectives on the same set of actions. So you'll have differing angles, and sometimes the differing angles on, say, someone walking. And so you have one side of the split screen focusing in on one perspective, and another side of the split screen focusing on another perspective on the same set of actions. Or sometimes one side will be blank, or it will be imageless, while something else is going on. or sometimes it'll be on two different sets of actions. So for instance, maybe one side is focusing in on the performance, while the other side is focusing in on the spectators, the audience members that are looking at such performance. And while that's happening, we'll see the interaction, as I say, between, the blurring of the lines between the spectator groups and the performer or actor groups. Or sometimes the split screen will be engaged to form a type of mirror image. The same image will be shown, but it'll be a mirror image of each other. So one side will be one version of the image, and the other side will be a mirror flip of that same image. So we have that split down the middle of different sides of a mirrored image going on, which is also a very fascinating aspect of the split screen type of cinematic style. And I mention this too because, again, I think this is used in a way to highlight or augment the various angles that can occur, or the various perspectives that can occur within the live space structure. One can call this a work that is almost like a documentation of the actual live performance going on. So whenever you have this sort of live event performance type of work, you usually have many angles going on to capture as many viewpoints and perspectives as possible. And then how to show that, you can either edit them together sequentially, or in the case of something like Dionysus in 69, you can have the split screen process. You can have both things happening at the same time, which again has a very fascinating feel and look to it. I mean, there is a sense of a multi-purpose or a multimedia type of feeling to it. You're looking at various things at once. So in many ways, this is a kind of multitasking in terms of the viewership of one watching the film. And then you're spotting different details that are going on. Say you're spotting the way in which the viewers are watching the thing and are interacting with the thing, while you also see, say, differing perspectives and differing angles, which also creates a sense of unification within the whole space itself, but also a sense of a type of euphoric, off-kilter lack of balance. And I mean that in a positive way, a sense of there's a sense of a really poetically applied discord, which I think is meant also to suggest, or one interpretation is that one can take is that it could suggest a sense of applied chaos, because one of the aspects of Dionysus in 69 is the idea of applied chaos and things that have almost, as I mentioned, an orgiastic feel to it. And there's a way in which there's a sort of celebratory nature and a majestic nature, but there's also a sense of the free fall of the chaotic winds of the whimsy of people and things and actions that are just doing things that are very much can be said to be overly free-willed, as a manner of speaking. So there's a sense of the emotionally and psychologically chaotic, which I think is part of the feel of this. And we get that with the sense of many things happening at once as applied through the split screen. So it's a very effective means of transmission of ideas and thoughts and feelings, and also a sense of the performance and the space of the theater itself, which is also a key aspect, capturing the space of the theater within the space here. So I also want to say too that the work has a type of well, I should say too that the work has a real quality of sitting within the context of Brian De Palma's filmography, because of things like the blurring of the blurring of the line between the audience spectatorship and the performers. And so the idea of what is art and what is quote unquote realism or reality within the context of the film itself. And we'll get this time and time again within the body of Brian De Palma's work, for example, his early works. And then also to the split screen apparatus, or the application of the split screen, which we will also see applied with a sense of a wonderful artistic sensibilities in future works. And so it's applied here very, very skillfully. And so we'll also see in other works how Brian De Palma will continue to apply the split screen in fascinating ways. Here is one such example of the fascinating application of such split screen technique. And then also the appearance of William Finley. As I mentioned, William Finley continues to almost bend the boundaries, shall we say, in terms of his own range of performance. And we've seen even early on in a work like Murder a la Mode, how physical he gets into his roles. And here is another great example: is he's very physical And as I mentioned, some of his speeches are very intense indeed, and they also blur the lines between the performance aspect and himself playing a role, which he creates self-referential points during his speech or his speeches, and also the way that there's a type of electricity in the air because he's playing arguably, one of, if not the main character in the work itself, that of Dionysus. So there's a lot riding on William Finley and his presence here, and so we have another, as I say, William Finley Brian De Palma collaboration, which is really great. So in those ways and more, I would say that this film, I think, very very nicely sits within the canon of the De Palma filmography. And it also, I mentioned, is curious and interesting in terms of the idea of the capturing of theater and capturing of art. Again, the performance group performances here from 1969. So it is not it is not this thriller. It is not, one could say, a type of comedy that we've seen in films like, say, Greetings, or sort of thriller type film like, say, Murder a la Mode. So it's a different type of approach to cinema. It's something that is probably described more akin to, say, the documentary or the live performance type of work. So it's another aspect of the Brian De Palma, say, film aesthetic, in collaboration with other artists as well, like Richard Schechner and the TPG, the Performance Group, and others. So a very interesting work in and of itself. So, I've described it in these very general terms, and so if you're interested, I think it is a very, it's, if you can find it, I think it's definitely worth checking out. It might not be for everyone. I mean, there is a sense too that in the way that it's described it in terms of its capturing of a live theater performance, it might be regarded by some to really not be the type of Brian De Palma work that people are used to in terms of his quote unquote more famous works from the later parts of his period, of his later parts of his filmography, excuse me. So if you feel that way and you feel that this is, you're like Brian De Palma, but you don't really like this film, Dionysus in 69, that's totally okay. I understand that. But as I say, for reasons that I try to suggest now, I think one can find certain aspects that could be said to be very much consistent with the filmography of Brian De Palma. Dionysus in 69. Okay, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great, great, great movies. So thank you, as always, for your time. I very, very much appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.